How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in this episode, I thought I'd try to say something about an important avant garde movement, namely the social and artistic movement of the early 20th century, Futurism. Okay, so let me begin by going back to Italy in the early first decade of the 20th century. Now, Italy is sick then, to say the least. It's a country in decline. It's got little industry and it's economically poor. It's culturally backwards and it's politically irrelevant. And the Catholic Church, well, it's keeping the citizens bogged down in tradition and so stuck in the past. Things don't look too promising or forward-looking. Okay, well, now let's move forward a bit to 1909, right before the turn of the decade, and let's look at the Parisian newspaper Le Figaro. There, published in the February edition, we're confronted with an article on the front page entitled The Founding and Manifesto of Futurism. A manifesto written by the Italian poet and provocateur Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. And what was the gist of it? Well, it was a proclamation which called for the absolute glorification of everything new and modern in Italy. A total cultural rebirth. This is what Futurism meant for Marinetti. It was a call for modernity. But more specifically, it was a call for industrialization and technology and innovation, and maybe most of all, speed. This is the breakneck speed and velocity of the machines that he's got in mind here. The speed of planes and trains and automobiles. Actually, Marinetti's so intoxicated by the prospect of speed that he even launched an attack on pasta. Imagine that, in Italy. Because he said it rendered people lethargic and inactive. Anyway, so given his goal of this total societal rebirth, what Marinetti does is he calls for the destruction of all previous culture. For him, the past is a disease that needs to be eradicated at all costs. As he himself says, every day we must spit on the altar of art. So in art, there is no more traditional nudes, no more mythological landscapes. No, from now on, futurist art shall only reflect the principles of speed and movement and forward motion. And it's not just the eradication of traditional art. It's everything cultural. Again, as Marinetti himself says, I have taught you to hate libraries and museums. And by the way, we can add religion to that as well. All of it out to make way for the future, to walk in step with the progress of the machine. But this futurist manifesto, it was also even more radical. And that's because, aside from the goal of the eradication of the past and the reshaping of society, futurism was also a call for force and for war. And that's because, as Marinetti tells us, war is the world's only hygiene, the only real cleanser of the earth. Not only is war necessary for progress, and here you see his sympathies with social Darwinism, but ultimately, life, he says, is just movement and struggle, a brute will to power. So Marinetti's manifesto includes not only an all-out idolatry of the machine and the technological, but it also advocates brute energy and violence and destruction, all in the name of this cultural and national rebirth. Now, given this, it's no surprise to find out that Marinetti later becomes an active supporter of Mussolini and a supporter of fascism. Marinetti dies in 1944. Okay, Well, so now I want to throw in my 2 cents here, because all of this is really interesting and provoking stuff, to say the least. So, first of all, I want to try to say something about just how prescient Marinetti's futurist account was. In particular, when it comes to this idea of the deification and the assimilation of the machine. And second, I want to try to briefly comment on Marinetti's total repudiation of the past, and with it the complete glorification of everything new, because I think it's deeply problematic. Okay, so let's take the futurists' deification and assimilation of the machine first. So what Marinetti does is he calls combustion engines and motorcycles divine. And he says that he prays every night to his little electric light because of all the speed inside of it. Now here we have one of the first examples of machine worship. But my oh my, how quaint and how harmless this sounds today, doesn't it? I mean, today there is almost a complete deification of the technological, isn't there? Like the omnipotence and the omniscience of the old dead God, technology, and in particular, artificial intelligence, has become an incontestable force, the supreme oracle, something that we are supposed to revere and fear like we did God. Something we supplicate ourselves to, something from which we seek authorization and take our orders from. In AI, we trust. And for Marinetti and the futurists, it's not just their machine worship, it's also their call for a man-machine merger or assimilation that's central to their agenda. As Marinetti himself says, the new man will fuse with iron and feed upon electricity. What's more, he says this, he says, we believe in the possibility of an incalculable number of human transformations, and we are not joking when we declare that in human flesh, wings lie dormant. The airplane, in other words, is the mechanical extension of man. Essentially, the goal for the futurists is to breed a new man-machine hybrid. One who's capable of transcending the mere human and its imperfections. Well, again, there's a deep resonance here today, isn't there? The futurists' machine merging and techno-utopianism here is, well, it's really a version of our transhumanism. You know, this ever more popular movement which extols the goal of freeing ourselves of our humanity through technological enhancements until we become entirely post-human and eventually star children. Now, of course, I'm saying this a bit sarcastically. I mean, I am well aware of the benefits of some artificial enhancements and how life-transforming they can be for people who are injured or who suffer from one disability or another. But that said, there is in a lot of transhumanist thinking strong elements of a kind of surrogate religion, isn't there? I mean, after all, as the leading transhumanist Ray Kurzweil tells us, the goal is to transform ourselves into spiritual machines. And how many times do we hear of the transhumanists' appeal to transcendence and its promise of immortality or eternal life? Ultimately, whether it's acknowledged or not, it's hard not to see in transhumanism an outgrowth of Christian eschatology. Okay, well, now finally, I want to try to say something about Marinetti's repudiation of the past, which basically includes all of traditional culture. Now, in my opinion, this sort of thinking, this sort of wrecking ball approach is, simply put, dangerous and stupid. I mean, why would we throw away all that we've learned and experienced? As the philosopher John Stuart Mill emphasizes, tradition and custom contains not just the wisdom of the ages, but also the accumulated weight of human experience. And for that very reason, the past deserves our deference and our respect. I don't know, dismissing the past is a lot like growing up without a mother and a father. And what does that lead to? Well, it's not good. It means that there's no authority figure, nothing for the child to have to respect, and nothing to follow in the footsteps of. And here's the thing. Such an absence of authority and physical bonding is a breeding ground for all sorts of problems. And in particular, for fastening on to all sorts of dangerous bonds and parent substitutes in the future. And in Marinetti's and the Futurists' case, I think you can partly see this, these parent substitutes. It's the ideology of Futurism itself. This is a false idol, a corrupt father figure, one born without an older world and so without the bonds of love and respect. You know, it's funny, so neglectful of the larger matriarchal world is Marinetti that one of his dreams is to have the futurist man triumph over women by creating life himself. This is what he says. He says, one day we will be able to create a mechanical sun. Well, again, good luck to all those future sons born without a mother. I don't know, I guess another way of coming at what I'm trying to say here is that there's something deeply problematic or pathological about this intense focus on the new and the shiny and the young at the expense of the old. But this is not just the attitude of the Italian futurists I'm talking about here. It's maybe even more so our own attitudes today in our contemporary world. I mean, as Professor Robert Harrison at Stanford University says, we today might actually be the youngest society on Earth. And by young, he means young in the sense of our Peter Pan obsession with youthfulness and not ever wanting to grow up. I mean, for instance, it seems pretty undeniable that now more than ever, beauty is all about youth. And the old, well, that's ugly. Old age has become an objection to life. Ageism rules, whether we admit it or not. And so what do? Well, we try to do away with it by spending billions of dollars on plastic surgery or Botox or collagen or Photoshop to mask the first visible signs of aging. And this is no good because in this age of beauty as eternal youth, life has no narrative. It has no beginning and no middle and no end. As the psychoanalyst Erik Erikson says, lacking a culturally viable ideal of old age, our civilization does not really harbor a concept of the whole of life. In other words, because we're embarrassed by age and so hide it, we have no sense of, and so no appreciation of, what a full human life really is. And this too is tragic, as what happens is that we die in limbo, incomplete and prematurely. We don't die in the sense that life has come to its proper end. We don't die life's conclusion. You know, we might do well to listen to Cicero, who reminds us that each stage of our life has been allotted its own appropriate quality, whether it's the strength of youth or the wisdom of old age. That is, each stage bears some of nature's fruit, which must be gained in its own season. To constantly swim against the tide is to neglect the fruit of the full spectrum of life's seasons. Well, there are no seasons to experience in the futurist utopia. Or there's just one, spring. And actually, Marinetti welcomes this. He says that once we turn 40, younger and stronger men will throw us in the wastebasket, like all useless things. And they should, he says. Well, the real truth of the matter is that there's nothing useless about being older. And if we're going to throw anything in the wastebasket, maybe it's a manifesto that refuses to acknowledge otherwise. Bye for now.